Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamatassa tawaraye sodavanta bamunchantu satang. So this is Sunday evening, and so we have a couple of days remaining before you return to your normal life. So the mind, of course, tends to look to the future, what to do after this retreat. And so again, I urge you to contemplate the future as the unknown. And this is, the now is the knowing, here and now, sitting, breathing, feeling, whatever, is here and now. And after the retreat is the future, that's a perception of the future. So, for the remainder of this retreat, keep reflecting on that, so that you can plan your future after the retreat. But just I encourage you to keep penetrating this as things come to an end, then of course the mind, what's next? This is before the retreat, probably some of you, 12-day retreat, I don't know if I can sit still, or, anticipation, worry about what might happen before the retreat starts, and then at the end of the retreat the mind thinks, what next? And so be this knower rather than trust this sense of knowing, of awareness of this busy mind that is time-bound, committed to the perception of time. And it's these little references and reflections that help us to it takes patience, because we would like to be enlightened all at one go and for the rest of our lives never suffer again. But this lifetime is not really very long, speaking from experience. Looking back on it, my monastic life just seems to have gone by like a rocket. It's hard to believe I'm 75 years old, and then I think of I ordained in 1966, and to most of you that's really ancient history. But for me, it just isn't. It's not. It seems almost like a few years ago. So then perceptions of time are, conditioned by age and emotion. Like when you're really miserable and in pain, time goes by very slowly. When you're really happy, time goes by very fast. So is time our reality? Is it really 60 minutes to the hour, 24 hours for one day, and so forth? Or that's the logical reference. But in terms of experience, what's happened to the beginning of the retreat? Now that's a memory, isn't it? And that's how fast it goes. Just a few days ago we were beginning, and now it's only a memory. And a memory is not to be despised, but to be recognized. It is what it is. A memory comes and goes. It's very ephemeral, and it has no real substance, but it can have a strong effect on our emotions. So, but this is like investigating Dhamma, so that you begin to look at things in terms of the way it is rather than the way you think it is or believe it is. Now, in the Buddhist world, there's a lot of opinions and views about how to practice, and so, because teachers, we usually speak from our own experience. So we might sound, like we're, idea is to convey our experience to someone else as a kind of, to share what we've learned with others. The actual Dhamma teachings, of course, are recorded quite well in the Pali Canon and books and so forth. So this is not a problem in finding the traditional forms. But but like any scriptural teachings, they tend to be stated in a certain way that sometimes we interpret and sometimes misinterpret. Just like my reference to about killing kilesas, that in Thailand they talk about Ajahn Mabu talking about, Ajahn Chah even talked about killing kilesas, and so is that wrong? Or how does that word work for you? When you talk about killing your kilesas, your defilements, in other words. For me, that tends to put me in this position very much of having to get rid of them, annihilate them. So I had to figure out how to even, to let go of kilesas or defilements. You have to receive them, recognize them. Otherwise, one just gets caught in habitual patterns of suppressing out of aversion, out of vipavaddanha, out of fear, and without really observing or knowing what you're doing. You're following the instructions, but from the Sakyaditi level. The teacher said, I've got to kill my kilesas, so what do you do? So here's a question, and it's asking me if it would be greedy to ask me to talk about rebirth. No, it won't be greedy. Except what do you want? So this is a interesting word. Like the word reincarnation is Luang Por Chah used to always talk about reincarnation as the kind of traditional way that people talk, a previous life and the next life in terms of physical birth. So when I talk about reincarnation, that more implies this in a previous life, another body, and then this incarnation, reincarnated in this body, and then in the next life, who knows what body I'll have, hopefully none. And then about in terms of the word rebirth, that's more useful way of thinking, because that you can actually witness in your mind. You know how many times you're being reborn throughout the day and night, just with your thinking. And in Paticca Samuppada, this dependent origination, this is a very skillful tool to use for observing the rebirth process mentally. And so, there is controversy. Some people think Paticca Samuppada is three-life theory, which then it tends to be like reincarnation. But in Buddhadasa, it's simultaneous arising, so it's in the moment, it's momentary rather than three lives. And notice how this really works. If you're, if my previous life, to wait for the next life, that still reinforces the sense that I'm this body, and that if I practice the Dhamma, then I will be reborn in a better state in the next one. Where rebirth is much more immediate, and it follows this sequence of ignorance conditions, sankharas, or the body and so forth, the consciousness, the body, and which then we experience contact and like sense contact or mental contact. Then we have desire or feeling, desire, and then grasping. And that grasping is of desire is the process of becoming or rebirth. So when we're mindful, then we can observe in ourselves how many rebirths have we had today. Are you the same personality that when you woke up this morning and at the mealtime and at this time? Is the personality the same, or has it changed? So you're contemplating this process of change from grasping desire, danha upadana bhava, becoming, and then the result is suffering, getting old, jaramara nang sokaparita, and then goes on, grief, sorrow, despair, and anguish. So this is a very interesting thing to do if you're interested in reflecting, investigating Dhamma. Then I encourage investigating Paticca Samuppada. And there's a book by Prapayutto, who's one of Thailand's most highly regarded monks, and some of his works have been translated into English, and there's one that's very difficult to get now, but I'm trying to get it republished on this Paticca Samuppada, because it just is skillful way to reflect and to use this. This is a tool to use for kind of looking at the same thing at this present moment from slightly different perspectives. So that then the result of this kind of reflection is you begin to see how you create yourself, how when there is when you start feeling bored, fed up, uncertain, so forth, then we tend to seek rebirth in something like, some people are, will eat a lot, or smoke, or drink, or become obsessed with work, or television, or internet, or all kinds of things, rebirth into these different conditions. Because so much of our life is, we like the arising of things, when it's interesting, inspiring, the romantic side of relationship, the adventure. These are all exciting, and we like this side of life. But when then it reaches a peak, and then we tend to seek rebirth in something else. So I notice, how as a Buddhist monk, your ability to be reborn is more limited than in lay people because of the Vinaya. You don't have all the choices and options that lay people have. And you don't have television, or I don't have any computer or anything like this. So when I get bored, or life is dreary or disappointing, then I could contemplate this tendency to want to eat something. So some people, we can't eat food in the afternoon. So, where if I were a layman, I'd be munching snacks and things like this. But then when you've got the Vinaya, then it kind of stops you, in your tracks, because it's against our discipline. But then you begin to look at that, how like boredom or restlessness or just feeling worried or anxious, and the mental states that are no longer interesting or pleasant. The romance is over, the adventure's gone, the interest has disappeared. And then this other side, it's the old age, sickness, death. Like, you notice how we love babies and youth, and the society these days really loves, it's a youth culture. Everybody's trying to be young all the time, and youth is admired, and youth praised, and to be young and healthy and beautiful is where it's at. And then when you get older, then old age, sickness, and death, this is the boring part. Nobody loves you anymore. So you're kind of cute or lovable, so. And so you're, be thrown in the dustbin of the past. But I'm just joking around now. But notice there is a kind of truth to this reflection. Like my sister was telling me, and she's 2 years older, and her husband, they used to live in Southern California, in San Diego, and when they retired, he was a lecturer at a university there, they moved back to Washington State, and they're very devout Roman Catholics, and my sister's a very sociable kind of person, so wherever she is, she's kind of the center of things. And so in their church, Catholic church in San Diego, she was very much well known and had, was admired, and she had an important position in her old age, and people, they've known her for years. So then they moved to Vancouver, Washington, which is a small town across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon, where they didn't know anybody. They went to the Catholic church, nobody knew them. And my sister said, it's like you're sitting there and nobody, like you're invisible, like an old lady, nobody. She said it was a shock for her, because she was used, in her familiar setting, she was somebody, and then she's the same person, but in a different setting, and she's old, so nobody even notices her. And this is what old people tend to find in their lives. Another incident was, years ago, I was up in the York Minster, and it was, and there was a lot of tourists. Like there was a coach of old people from a retirement home, and we were on our way to Harlem up in Northumberland. So we were stopped off to see this beautiful church in York, and went in and admiring the architecture and the vaulted ceilings and all this. And then I saw these two old women sitting on a bench. So, I'm a monk, so I thought maybe they'll be frightened of me, I don't know, but I went over and I greeted them, and they were so happy just that somebody talked to them. They said, "You've made my day." And they weren't looking at York Minster either, they were looking at me. So and I didn't do anything but acknowledge their existence. So you think of how that, it's rather sad in a way, that they're obviously, we're used to being ignored. And so this is a reflection on the uninteresting part of life, or the other side, the old age, sickness, death. Now apply that to mental states, like being bored, fed up, weary, always in terms of what how long can you stay interested in something and keep it at a peak when then you get bored or fed up or tired of it and look for something else. How you might look forward to going to a good restaurant for a meal, and how much can you eat without getting reaching a point where you don't want to eat anything anymore. And then they could bring out the most delicious, appetizing delicacies, and you wouldn't be interested. And then you have to digest this food, but you don't want to deal with that, so you go to the cinema. Not like that, a way of in continuous rebirth of just distracting yourself to the next rebirth when this one gets weary or tiresome or boring or uninteresting. So in this retreat, notice how, it's in terms of worldly values, it's not exciting or romantic or adventurous or, you have to sit and deal with just sitting and breathing and sound of silence and things like this, so that this is, arranged in a way where we can begin to contemplate the nature of things. It's not to discipline you as a person and kind of hold you down to kind of teach you a lesson, but it's an opportunity to really observe things that we wouldn't normally have the occasion or opportunity to observe in changing emotions, or in a situation where you have to, like sitting here for 2 weeks, you notice that you don't have the options to escape. So maybe strange emotions start coming up in your consciousness. Some people get terrified on a meditation retreat because all their repressed feelings start bubbling up into consciousness. And maybe they think, I'm going on a retreat with Ajahn Sumedho, and I'm going to have a really peaceful, go into tranquil state and forget all the world. And then you come here and you sit, and all you're getting is the resentment, anger, fear. And then you come and you say, Ajahn Sumedho, I think I'm practicing all wrong. I'm just getting these terrible mental states, and how can I get rid of them? And then of course it's not something to be frightened of, but to recognize. As I said before, it's a cleaning, a purification process. That we're letting things come into consciousness and letting them go. Another one of the people I'm talking with today is telling about, they have these very kind of thoughts that come up in their mind. Maybe they're just nonsense and rubbish and silly things, stupid things, childish thoughts, and so this also is to be. I was telling him about my own experience with this, because one likes to, if you've got the conceit I have, you like to think of yourself as intelligent, reasonable man. And so I guess much of my life before I became a monk, meditated, was to, every time a stupid or nonsense or foolish thought came in, I would just ignore it, push it away. I can't be bothered with that kind of rubbish. So there was a way of just guiding yourself, and anything that wasn't worthwhile you just dismissed. And then in this life, suddenly all the most silly kind of foolish things started coming up into consciousness. I think, where is this coming from? What's going on here? And then you think, well, why do all these stupid thoughts and foolish things and really boring thoughts would come up, and then I'd try to get rid of them just like I did. And then finally I got the point that it's all the repressed years of stuff that had been held back coming into consciousness. So even seeing, I saw various kind of hallucinations, kind of madness come into consciousness. And so one time I even saw, I had this hallucination. I saw all the people I knew walking out of my brain, out of my head. I could visually see them. Now, where did that come from? I'm not prone to that kind of hallucination. At least I never thought I was. And yet, and then, if you try to interpret it from society's view of what's normal, you think you're going crazy. Because if you tell people about it, they think you're crazy. But this is also to not to despise it. Whatever does arise, and whether it's sensible or not, good or bad, this awareness is your refuge. So it is a safe place to open this prison cell, let all the wretched creatures you've been torturing for years out. Look at it that way. So rebirth then is this process of becoming, and that's why in contemplating the Four Noble Truths, you begin to see this in yourself, the boredom, the disillusionment, the despair, the weariness. One just sometimes wants to just, reach oblivion. Not to have another rebirth would be to annihilate yourself. So there's kind of a death wish sometimes, just wanting to not exist. But that isn't the answer, to try to annihilate yourself, but to have the patience, like metta, loving kindness, patience, willingness to bear with the karma that you're experiencing in the present, no matter what it might be. And so then you're not being reborn, you're merely being this awareness in which the rebirth process is not happening. But once you attach out of ignorance to desire, then it takes you to becoming and old age, sickness, death, or grief, sorrow, despair, and anguish. Mentally. Like anguish is another word. Much of life is about anguish, isn't it? As you get older, there's a lot of disappointment and disillusionment. When you're young, when I was young, I was very idealistic and kind of, my future is ahead of me, and I've got, I'm going to be somebody and improve the world. And then after a few years, you kind of feel a disappointment with yourself and all your efforts, because that's the way things are. You can't sustain and inspire inspiration. One can go from one inspiring thing to another. So, you can't, where we get bored with this, we go to another. You try Theravada Buddhism, you get bored with that, and then you go to Zen, you get bored with that, and then you go to Tibetan, get bored with that. You try psychotherapy, get bored with that, and you try Vedanta, get bored with that, and then you become a Roman Catholic, get bored with that. It's like everything that you become interested in does reach a peak, and that's one reason why the robe, the monastic form's so good, because it's not so easy to leave it. You can't. Where if you're a lay person, you get bored, you just don't come anymore. But if you're a monk or a nun, then you kind of got others looking at you, and it took something to get into it, and it's also, it's not that easy to get out of it. So one will put up with and hopefully learn from disillusionment with. One expects a lot maybe from monastic life, and you don't get what you expected. You can romanticize monasteries thinking, oh, at home it's a real, it's like living in hell, but Amaravati is so wonderful. It's so peaceful. Just ask the people that live here how peaceful it is. So, this is, and then when if you do spend time here, then you can become disillusioned with it. And in my own experience in Thailand, when I first went to live with Ajahn Chah, I was so inspired. This is the best monastery I've ever encountered. Best teacher in the whole world. I'm going to stay here forever. And then after a while, I began to notice things I didn't like, and after the inspiration, the kind of honeymoon period ended, then it's then your critical mind starts observing this, and before you didn't really notice or didn't really want to notice. So rebirth, reincarnation is the coarser version. Rebirth is useful because you can see that which observes boredom or disillusionment or despair, anguish. It's like saying that these are emotions that we all experience, and that when we seek rebirth, how do I get rid of doubt? How do I get rid of sleepiness? How do I get rid of despair or depression or these negative states? Wanting to get rid of them is, we can observe that. This desire to find something inspiring again, to have something to live for, to lift us up. And so then we seek something to, another condition to do that. But in like samatha practices are very good to develop because they're skillful ways of exercising, mentally exercising positive conditions, to gain skill in to brighten the mind, to have more sense of peaceful tranquility and brighten the mind, not as an end in itself, but as a skillful means to deal with despair, disillusionment, boredom, disappointment, old age, sickness. And then it says also the real self. He wants me to talk about real self. Real self. And so, like this, when I use the word self, this applies to conditions. The personality, sakkaya ditthi, and so this is a conditioned self. So in like Advaita Vedanta and so forth, they talk about the big self, capital S, and the little self. And so that in Buddhism, they don't talk about the big self. It's completely blank. The big self is it has no name. So when we talk about the real self, that's you, being mindful. And then the little self is what you think you are. So I mean, this is one way of reflecting. This is how I use these words. And so you the big self, and then I, that reminds me of awareness, like a Buddho. It's not, I think I'm Buddha, but if, I can understand, like in the Advaita Vedanta style, that is this awareness. In Buddhism, you don't have a name for it. But you have these symbols that point to it, like Buddha, mindfulness, Buddha, the deathless. And then, you recognize the state of this present moment is coming from this point, where the physical form you're in. And then you see yourself in terms of your body, your feelings and so forth, so that these are the little selves. I'm like Ajahn Sumedho's a little self, or it's a convention only. Or before I ever meditated, then I actually believed I was, this person, this body, this type, this nationality. I really believed that was really me, because there'd never been any investigation of it in any deep way, merely just the conditioning of the years of cultural conditioning reaffirmed a sense of me as a separate personality. And then going into Buddhist meditation, then it gave me a different perspective on this, and it was a relief not to be what I think I am. I find that a relief. And so I used to ask myself, if I have an eternal soul, like in Christianity, I was taught you had an eternal soul. So when you died, that eternal soul, if you've been good in your life and been a Christian, then you go up to heaven to live with Jesus and so forth. So I started asking myself, if there's something in my personality that I would like to keep forever, just inquire, that I want for eternity. And sorting through all my mental states and physical, I certainly don't want this body for eternity. And then, really, this little self, there's nothing in it that I particularly want to keep forever. But what you begin to awaken to is this pure consciousness that isn't self, that has a sense of, it's a mystery, because you can't get it in terms of through desire and grasping, but through awakening. And so this awakening is the best suggestion. Awakened consciousness, and not reinforce the sense of this little self I have to purify. You'll never purify the little self. I warn you. Because its very nature is impure. I mean, it just changes. There's no purity in conditioned phenomena. But in the unconditioned, this is pure. And it's not like a void or dead or a vacuum of nothingness like it might sound on the intellectual level. But it is a mystery, and that's why, like, mysticism is opening to the mystery, isn't it? The mystery is something you this mystery you can't solve through the little self, or through cultural conditioning, or through modern science, or psychology, or anything. It's through opening to the mystery, surrendering to it. It's like throwing yourself open to the unknown, rather than always trying to know everything, or get confirmation, yes, everything's all right. I was the kind of person that I just wanted you to say everything's all right, even if it wasn't, because it makes me feel better. They say, Ajahn Ananda, is everything all right? He says, yes, Ajahn, everything's all right. Ask Sister Jittapal, everything all right? Says, yes, Ajahn, everything. And then I ask Sister Dhammadeer, is everything all right? She says, no. Oh, what's wrong? so they say, just tell me how it went. Just tell me everything is okay. Make me feel good. But in this way, you're getting beyond that tendency to even want people to lie to you because it makes you feel good, but to open to ultimate reality. This is the real. This is the deathless. This is what you trust. This is the real self, in other words. And this little self is merely this kind of conditioned sense of me and mine that you've acquired after you've been born. So another one is about, somebody said that and I heard non-duality teacher saying, don't do good as its effects on one are to condition bad elsewhere. This shocked and didn't feel right, but also seems to have a certain logic. They asked me to comment on this. So this sense of, the general advice is do good and refrain from doing bad. And I find this more helpful. Instead of somebody says, don't do good because it conditions bad, then that taken on the ego level, in the Sakyaditi level, what does it do? It's not going to do anything. And then that, you see somebody lying with a, helpless, or, having broken a leg or something. I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to do good or bad, make bad karma. It's a not very admirable way to be, actually. But this is, this awareness puts you into, where good and bad are seen as conditions. So, on a personal level, if I go around trying to do good just from ignorance, it's still better than doing bad out of ignorance, isn't it? Even if I never have insight into Dhamma, it's always good advice, say, do good and refrain from doing bad. Because goodness is good, and bad is bad. And then, but they do depend on each other. So, but also just trust yourself to notice doing good, the result of doing good is usually a sense of joy or self-respect. And then doing bad things, it gives you a sense of fear and paranoia. So this you can prove to yourself, then you can investigate. But this awareness that's what I really love about this teaching, is this deathless, this sense of the unborn, uncreated, unconditioned. It allows for both. It's not, good and bad, right and wrong, heaven and hell. And then in our relationship to each other, to the society, to the environment, is to do good and refrain from doing bad. But the awareness accepts both good and bad equally. They both belong, so to try to ignore this, or you just you turn yourself into a very confused person with that kind of advice, because then you end up with this feeling of you shouldn't do anything, because you might, even doing good creates bad karma, is not very, it's not a way to live your life. And this way is that doing good is, as a monk, makes this life pleasant, being a Buddhist monk in England at Amaravati, because the intention's good and the result is good. The results aren't always good, but my intention is to do good and not to do bad. And on terms of action and speech. Then in terms of mental states, then that, they come according to other conditions. So you can still feel, negative or emotions and so forth, but, I'm not going to make that the active side of my life, to act on them or speak on them. So that's awareness, because that you can decide, and what comes into your consciousness, you can't always have that much control over. When the conditions arise, then you feel like this. So your vipaka karma, the resultant karma of your life arises in the present, and it might be very unpleasant or negative, but the awareness of it means that if it's negative and asks you to do bad things, you don't do it. But you certainly know it as a condition. You let it go, you don't resist, push it away, or identify with it. You just be patient. And of course all conditions are impermanent. And then another question about guilt, difference between guilt and moral shame. And so, like in Pali terms, hiriotapa is like knowing when you've done something bad. I mean, it's like having a conscience. So you tell a lie and you know it, even if no one else does. There's a sense of shame, or say having a conscience. And then it becomes guilt when you create it into more than that. Like hiriotapa is a skillful thing. We couldn't learn if we didn't have it. So that is something to respect in yourself. But guilt becomes a kind of, as I use this word guilt, it becomes an obsession, and we can feel guilty, as a habitual tendency. Through not understanding ourselves, we can feel guilty because we told a lie 30 years ago, and think we're going to be punished. I know people that feel guilty almost continuously, and that these people can be very good and wholesome people, but it's kind of like an obsession of based on maybe conditioning when you're young to think that your past, whatever you've done, you're going to be punished, and that even now you have a negative thought. You feel hatred towards somebody you should love in the present, and then you feel. Now, hiriotapa is recognizing it. And if you act on it, you say, I hate you, And then you have this sense of hiriotapa, that's like a conscience. But if you have mindfulness, if you cultivate that, then maybe the feeling of somebody you love and respect at this very moment you feel hatred for, you're aware of it, but you don't. You refrain from speaking or saying it. Now that's mindfulness, skillfulness. And you're not making karma in that way, even though the emotion can be, horrible emotion, but you're not grasping it by speaking or acting on it, nor are you creating guilt around it by saying, I should only love, and I'm a bad person for feeling hatred for those I love. And that is, one just creates a neurotic problem around yourself and your life and the conditioned realm that you live in. Right. Well, this is where as long as there's sakkaya ditthi, there's, even there's tendency to worry and create problems. So, like when the first three fetters have been seen through, then there's the stream entry, where that kind of thing ceases. You know better not to. But I mean, even very good people I know feel guilty about things that are really not anything to feel guilty about. I think it's just a kind of habit, of way of seeing oneself. And it is very much having lived in Asia, where they don't tend to have this. So I think it's very much a cultural, from Silabhata Paramasa. Then because as I explained before, Dalai Lama or people like that, they don't really understand why we have this, why we're so guilt-ridden, because culturally, I don't think their culture makes that implication, that there's something wrong with you, basically, because the Dalai Lama once said, Tibetans tend to like themselves. And I notice Thai people tend to like themselves, basically. And I don't, on a personal level, I don't like myself. It's a... And I'm quite a likable guy on it. But in terms of the cultural conditioning and personality, it doesn't move towards liking myself. It tends towards criticizing. And that falls away once you see it, once you have that insight. So also, like people that are born into families with very strong attitude of sinfulness and impurity, this you see it in born again Christians or people brought up in these very puritanical sects, or in very heavy Roman Catholic conditioning, where this sense of sin seems to be instilled in you when you're, probably from your mother's womb, feeling being a sinner or impure. And it's insidious, it's kind of problems that can arise in one's life just through this sense of feeling so anxious about yourself, or And with the early years of infancy, you're just getting what your mother and father think, and we probably even acquire what our mother thinks when we're in the womb. Because you're part of your mother, so how she's feeling is going to affect some way. I mean, I'm speculating because I don't remember being in the womb at all. But I noticed that throughout my life, there's certain, my mother always felt that she was unwanted, and that nobody loved her. And yet, we all loved her, and my father loved her, and she was a likable person. She had lots of friends. And yet, no matter how many friends and how many times, you affirmed this was a basic feeling. It wasn't rational. It wasn't based on rational thing. It's a kind of something, in her that had this thing. And then she told me once that she was unwanted when my grandmother tried to abort her. And then my grandmother didn't want a girl. She always said, "I never wanted you, girl. I wanted a boy." And so, I mean, that would, that's the kind of information you're getting right from the beginning, or maybe in the womb itself. Well, because it's irrational, because my mother was intelligent enough to see that this kind of haunting feeling was irrational, but she didn't know where it came from, except, psychologically she could see how, from her own experience. And then this, I think, without her intention, tends to be transferred to her children. So this is, and this is like the inheritance. But then in terms of one's practice, this is not a problem, because in this mindfulness practice, you actually, you can actually see it, this sense of a self, and this tendency to criticize or feel nobody likes you and things like that is something you begin to recognize as a condition that arises and ceases, not as something to identify with or believe in or to suppress. So this is where, this sequence of Sakkaya Ditthi, Silabbata Paramasa, Vicikicca these are the conditions you get. These are not natural conditions of, like nature. The body is a natural condition. It's made by nature. The consciousness is natural, and then the feeling, the sense world. We have these senses to so that we, and this is a feeling realm. So we feel, heat and cold, pleasure, pain. But this, because of our cultural identities and egos, then we create suffering around it. So everything becomes more than what it really is. And so, like with Buddhist meditation, you're getting back to the source, to pure consciousness, and before you become a person or anything at all, there is just this anatta, non-self. But it isn't even that. It's not like a denial. It's just this, which has no name, but it's certainly intelligent and real. And then we begin to see how, me and mine and what I think, and I'm this person, and that arises from that, out of that. and contemplate this realm we're in is a sense realm. It's a feeling realm. It's all about, pleasure, pain, right and wrong, good and bad. This realm that we're experiencing in the human form is this way, and so it's the way to learn from it is not to try to control it or destroy it, but to learn from it. And the way that we learn as human individuals is awakened consciousness. So it's like you're going back to the source, the ultimate source, where you have that perspective of knowing rather than becoming. So I'll stop here.